Alright, so third time's a charm. I you're probably not, well, you're definitely not gonna see the other two. So I recorded this video once already, got to the end, and then my fucking phone died, and iOS didn't save it, I guess, because I hadn't backed out of the video. And I needed to re-record it, but I didn't really want to because I don't like being on camera. I don't like talking, none of that shit. But I mean, that's life, you know. And then I just did what's this thing called? I just did another one on Instagram, and my rear camera wasn't working because I'm trying to show some of the processing and stuff that I'm doing. So anyway, I did this beat last night. I was up pretty late doing it, but it's pretty simple. Fucking dumbasses. It's like people just do shit to draw attention to themselves. But whatever. Okay. Yeah, so I started off with the piano. Turn this up. So I'm giving you what we would normally refer to as the dry, but it's not dry because the patch was already had like some reverb and stuff on it. So I took that and let's see if I can flip this. Let's see if y'all can see this. Awesome. So I'm gonna have to fucking zoom the fuck out. Switch this to compact. Okay. So, piano, right there. You see it? This is it by itself. I put what's called a compressor on top of it. Damn, this shit is really like zoomed the fuck in. So I'm using a preset from FabFilter called Invisible Sustain. Alright. So you can, it's hard to tell. I'd have to go into what compressors do, but you can see it catches the peaks and stuff. Kind of helps to even it out, makes it sound a little more definitive. Alright, so after that, added an EQ. As you can see, cut out a good bit of the lows, some of the mids, you know what I mean? Boosted this here, boosted these frequencies. And what you want to do is you want to cut a lot of this because this is where your 808, your bass or whatever is going to live. You know, and it just kind of helps to clean it up a little bit. All right, and then the last thing is reverb. This is a basic. I've been using FabFilter, but I just use the stock ones. 3D reverb, just kind of adjust everything. The wet's turned up pretty high. The wet setting is what the actual reverb sound is, if that makes sense. So think of the echoey type sound or whatever from your instrument as the wet. And then the dry is the original signal as it comes in. So, added the reverb. Alright, so that's the piano. Alright, okay, piano. On top of that, added a guitar. Got a similar amount of processing going on, just no reverb. So, it's the guitar. Again, the patch is already pretty wet, so I didn't have to add extra reverb onto it because when I bust my instruments together a little bit later on, there's going to be an ambient reverb with that. So, flip the camera. Alright. Guitar, second channel right here. On top of that, we FabFilter Pro C again. Damn, this shit is really zoomed the fuck. I'm gonna get this. Listen, y'all, this is real ghetto. This is super ghetto. I'm gonna get this shit worked out so I can just record and edit the videos, put the screen directly on there. So I compressed the guitar. Let me switch this. So without compression, as you can see it turned off, right? And then so when I turn it on, you'll see the waveform of the sound start to come through here. So I turn it on, and this is the guitar part. All right. adjust the compressor. Also put a parametric EQ just to catch some of the lows and mid frequencies again. And a lot of these here in the mid range, they kind of, your muddiness tends to be down here, but it can, how do I say this? A lot of stuff is hard to describe. It can affect the clarity of what you're doing. So it'll just like, it's hard to explain my thought process. It just makes it more clear, if that makes sense. It makes the stuff sound more definitive. All right, so that's the guitar, just a compression and an EQ. And the last thing in the instrumental section is this little pad melody thing. Normally I use pads for like chords and stuff, but this one kind of gave it like a light tone to use for like a melodic line. It really is more of a counter melody because the guitar would be the melody. Let's see, pad. Okay, and then this is the pad. Is it gonna play? Oh, I don't have it right here. Oh, put it right there. Okay. So I kind of go into it. My thought process is that you kind of have to know where things are gonna sit, or how a certain instrument or drum or whatever is being used within the mix. So, for instance, this pad is a counter melody. So don't really need too much character because it's really there to kind of like back up and, you know, emphasize the other melodies. But still wanted to, here, let me flip this for y'all again. Okay. Shit. All right, so you can see pads right here. And we're gonna gonna compress it again. This time I used so I actually used a vocal compression preset on here because, I mean, it's not a voice, but it kind of gives me them voice vibes when I would use like a vocal sample. But what I really did was I wanted it to cut through the mix so you could hear it without it being louder, without increasing the gain on it. And what I used to do was I used to use FL Studio's multi-band compressor, trying to like kind of increase the brightness of it. Brightness and darkness are like subjective for music, but fuck, man. All of these terms that I've heard from music like my whole life, it's hard to relay them because I'm always thinking of it from like an instrumentalist perspective, because I was in band, I played tuba, so a lot of stuff makes sense with instruments, and then it kind of makes sense translated to this, but whatever. Anyway, so I compressed it. I compressed this little pad sound so that it would cut through a little bit here. So I just turned the compressor on. Fab filter, Pro C again. So I compressed it. I didn't want to have to turn it up. And then I also EQ'd it. So didn't want some of those harsher high frequencies here, and didn't need any of the lows at all. So, and honestly, with it EQ'd like this is the part of the reason, this is part of the reason that I needed to compress it, because I knew that I would EQ a lot of the frequencies out. So in order for it to be heard or for it to stand out in the mix, it needed to be compressed. All right. And then I would normally say that kind of concludes the instrument parts, but I did do a, let's see if I can find it. I did use a transition effect. And let's see. It's probably gonna be kind of loud. Oh no, let me turn it up. So I mixed, I'll do everything with its own separate channel, but I bust the transition effect with the rest of the instruments because it still needed to like sit within that same environment and get the same processing that the rest of them did. Because I mean, it's not a drum, you know, and I wasn't just gonna whatever. So it's just a little riser. I think it's gonna trigger in a second. Right, so simple. I started to use the multi-band compression effect from the last one that I referred to, but I didn't use it because that made it too bright. Like it was cutting through the mix too much. It seemed more like it was, because it's much brighter. It's super bright. Like if y'all heard I just don't want to turn it up because that shit almost fucked my speakers up. But like, it didn't fit. It just doesn't fit with the mix. And so what the thing is, I mean, that's kind of what you want a transition effect for, to stand out, kind of sit on top. But yeah, so anyway, so that's that. So that's all the instruments. Let me delete this extra one that I put in here. Okay, and then what I did was I used what's called a bus channel, which basically it lets you do processing on multiple things at a time. That kind of, in my mind, it's all in like the same category, right? So all the instruments, that's like a category to me. So I bust all the instrument parts together. So I'm turning them on now. All right. And so now all of this is going to one channel. I can show you guys. So this, and this are all being sent to this instrument bus. I'm gonna have to go up and show you how they're routed. So you see, this is how you do your channel routing. So as you can see, they're all routed to the same channel. What typically happens is, I'll just click a blank one. This arrow going down here, it gets routed all the way to the master channel, which is where everything goes in the end. But you want to do like bus processing and stuff like that, do it this way. So I routed them all to the same channel. Yeah, so I bust them all to the same channel, and then I kind of do the same shit every time I bust my instruments. I used to only do like an auxiliary send reverb, and I mean, I'll still do kind of like a version of that. But so what I always start off with is compression, and you don't want to over compress your shit because it'll fuck it up, but you kind of have to a lot of the time. So let me flip it. So what I'm using is Fab Filter again. I'm using the EDM mid-side transient separation. And the reason, my thought process behind this is, I've gone through this a few times. How do I say this? So with compression, you kind of use it you can use it in a lot of different ways. I'm using it for two things: to gel everything together. So all the instruments, to kind of make them sound like they fit together. That's kind of the best way I know how to explain it. But also the way I'm doing this is, it's going to separate out the transient frequencies. It's going to basically identify, target them, and I don't want to say separate them, kind of emphasize them. So your transient frequencies are like, and this might be wrong, so all the audio people correct me, but it's like not necessarily the high shit, but in a sense, the stuff you hear. So, you know, like even a kick is a low instrument, right? But the punch or the snap of a kick hitting, that comes from the transient frequencies, which exist in the high end. So what this does is I'm compressing it, which gels everything together, but it's going to separate out all the transient frequencies from the different instruments. So it brings them together, but it makes them all more distinctive. So like they can all play at the same time, like this. Right? And then I add the compression, and you could kind of hear, it's all the same shit, but like the piano sounds more distinctive, you know, like the parts don't clash, like they don't muddy up with each other. That's what I know how to describe it. All right, and then I said I did something like an auxiliary send reverb. I can show how I do this. 12.06%. All right. So what I used to do was I would do one channel, and then you would send, or I would send a small percentage of like the instrumental channels to that channel. So 2%, 3%, whatever. And what I would have on there is like this huge, just fat ass reverb. And the way I learned it, if I'm not mistaken, from Busyworks Beats tutorial some years ago. Basically, you're putting your sounds in an environment. You want them to all sound like they're in the same place, right? So that's what the auxiliary reverb was for. It's not something that you hear as much as it's something that you kind of feel or not feel, perceive. You perceive it. You don't really hear it, and it just kind of. I'll let you hear like a version of it, but instead of doing it individually, I throw a reverb on the bus channel, and then I have a couple that I tend to use like preset wise, and it starts out like at like 100%. You just turn that shit way down to like I ended up using 12% on this. I mean, every beat is different, but yeah, you want to cut it down because you're not really supposed to hear it. It's supposed to just be. All this is coming from the same place. So without the reverb, well, with just the compression, it's the instrument bus, just compression, and then I have 12%. Let me flip the camera for y'all. I have 12% on the reverb right here. The mix level and the wet level are the same. But what I'm gonna do is, let's see, I'll show you. Sorry. This is so ghetto. So I'm going to copy the value right here so that we can go back to where it was before. And now I'm going to turn it all the way up because this is where it was. So when you initially do it, it's going to be like cranked up. So you got to turn it down because basically the way I explained how you use it. So you hear the instruments. Yeah, that's Fab Filter, but there's a bunch of them. So this is, oh shit, I'm about to flip it. This is Fab Filter Pro R reverb, but I use, I got like the whole suite of them. So, but I use the compressor, the reverb, and the EQ. Because I had been using like the FL stock shit or even the Waves plugins, but I like the Fab Filter ones. So, I don't know, I'm just like a visual person. I like being able to see all this stuff. So this is the reverb. As you can see, deep ambience. This is the reverb turned up all the way. I'm not going to use it in this state. I just want you to hear how it does, before we do any adjustments. It sounds like super far away, So, and then what you do is you take this, turn it down. I think we had it on 12%. Sounds okay. Yeah, it's just like atmospheric. You know what I'm saying? Like it just... Because even now, I don't really hear the reverb. Not really, It just gives it like a depth. That's the word. Alright. So... last thing I normally do, or last couple of things, EQ. Gotta EQ your shit. Because I still have drums and 808 and all kinds of stuff to go. So I use a low cut brick wall EQ. I actually use two. So this is just a Fab Filter preset. It sits at 50 hertz. Let me show you. It sits at 50 hertz and it cuts off everything underneath that. Because like we said earlier, don't need those frequencies. They're fucking pointless. So I'll turn this on. And as you can see, there's almost none of it's below this anyway. So with it being flat like this, it just doesn't affect anything. This is where everything is sitting. In the mids, not too much in the highs, which is good because my drums, especially the hi-hats and stuff, will help to fill out. Here, let me show you. Will help to fill out this area up here. Alright. So the last thing is I add a parametric EQ. And this just gives me a little more control just to fine tune what frequencies I'm going to cut. I do this solely to make room for the 808. In general, I have it at around 100 hertz, but I'll play with it because sometimes you need to be a little bit lower, you need a little bit higher, just depends. So the thing I like about the parametric EQ is it shows you where shit is when you trigger it. So, and that's why I like the Fab Filter plugins. It's similar. So before I set this up, it showed me dog, my neighbors get on my fucking nerves. Like, how I'm in here. Anyway, man, y'all motherfuckers lucky, man. I'm about to soundproof this house. Not for me. Not so they don't hear me, so I don't hear them. But anyway, so parametric EQ. I can see. So before I decided the frequency that I use, you can see where everything sits. So I can see where a lot of frequencies are sitting based off of like how dark and how like thick the lines are. So I'm gonna show you guys. You can see where a lot of it is sitting. So I just kind of drag this up. And honestly, you can use this the little frequency tool here. So I just increased it to 105. I think that makes it a little cleaner. And so all of this shit here, all is room for the 808. Right? Basically 808 kick, that type of stuff. Alright, so that is the those are the instruments and the instrumental bus processing. So I think I mentioned this in a previous video. I tend to compose my 808 with the instruments. A lot of people do it last. Yeah, a lot of people do it last, but I consider it to be part of my instrumental parts. Basically, it's just it takes a lot of space in the mix, so it hits like a drum, but like musically, it plays the role. I need sample beats or beat. Yeah, I'll get back to you. I'm gonna have to. I haven't checked my shit. I got so many DMs past few days, but yeah, I'll go look. And then also for you, it's a pack of beats in my bio. It's a free pack that I just did. If you wanna grab that, you can just hit the link. The fucking site, random as fuck. The site was down for like 3 hours yesterday. So not mine, but the site that hosts it or whatever. And somebody hit me up, thankfully. Was like, yo, the link not working. So, but it's back up now, so you should be able to do that. Yeah, we'll chat about like if you need something specific or whatever. But yeah, but it's the free ones are in my bio. So anyway, did the instrumental part, and now I'll move on to the drums. But what I really want to do is kind of preview the 808. Now, let's see. I compose it with everything else, but I'm going to preview it for you guys by itself so you can hear like the processing and stuff that I've used. Let me make sure that I think it's pattern 5. Yeah. Oh yeah, y'all not be able to see that. Yeah, I got to fix this situation with the with sharing the screen and shit. All right. So, can I zoom out further than this? Let's see. Can y'all see this? Probably, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, this is the 808 part. So we're in E flat minor. Key to beat. I believe E flat minor. Let me check. I'm pretty sure it's E flat minor. I just don't see that minor third. But whatever. Okay. So this is the bass line. Pretty simple. All right. So with the 808, gotta process that too. So have an EQ boosting at about 140 hertz. Gives it a little more of a knock. Right? Then I have stereo enhancer. Because a lot of times 808s are like in mono and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. That gives you a lot of punch, but it just we could fill it out a little bit more. Then I'm using the FL Studio Wave Shaper. Turn this on. You can't see it, when it triggers, and I'm not gonna fuck with it, but it does exactly what the name implies. It helps to like shape the waveform. I used to use compressors a lot for that, and I probably should, but it's pretty involved. My boy Brandon is real good with that shit. Like, you could kind of tell him what shape you want your 808 to be, and he can do all that shit just with a compressor. All right. And then we have equal. I don't know how to pronounce it. A lot of these are just different versions of the same shit. And basically what this does is it EQs stuff, but it adjusts what gets EQ'd based off of the as opposed to another one where it's just gonna cut or boost or whatever frequencies you pick. This one it's almost exponential in a sense, where it it'll adjust based off of what signal it receives. So in my mind, and this is dumb, but I think of it kind of like investing, where you look at I don't know, well, you have like simple moving averages, like your 50-day or 200-day moving average, but then you have your exponential moving average, which weights things a little bit differently. With investing, it weights more recent shit harder or higher, whatever, than previous shit. It's not exactly the same as with this, but this is kind of the exponential like type shit. So it's gonna adjust. So that, and then I have one more EQ cutting off the cutting off the very bottom 20 hertz, because you're not gonna hear none of that shit, and it just helps to kind of clean it up a little bit. Also cut the extreme highs. So all of that stuff just helps to make stuff kind of clean. All right, so that's the 808 and all the processing on it. And now we can move on to the drums. Let's see. So there's no kick in this beat. I decided to not use a kick in it because I just wanted the 808 to hit. So normally I would need to take the kick, mix the kick, and then re-level the 808 so that it sits slightly underneath the kick, so the kick can hit, and then you have but I don't have to do that in this scenario. So I guess I'll just leave the 808 on so you can hear the like how it fits beat wise. All right. So it's almost doing the function of a kick. If you were to take the notes out, it would be kick pattern, basically. All right. So with that, I have a regular ass snare. Cool. And this snare was kind of give me like a thicker sound, so I kind of liked it for that reason. It really gives me clap vibes, if that makes sense. But no, it's just a lower, thicker snare. All right, let me flip this around. So with this, all I did was EQ this shit, and I guess I can show you the actual pattern for it. Regular snare shit. So I EQ'd this just to eliminate some of the muddiness. Didn't necessarily really like need to cut out these, because when I do my drums butts, it does. Because you still want it dark, right? You want to keep these. You still want it dark and thick, but don't need the mud. It's something else that I tend to do, and I don't remember if I did it on that, but I normally adjust this. So I fucked with it, because normally it'll be in a different shape, but I turned it off. So didn't use that. Alright, so that's the snare. Alright, this plays like on the, I think it's syncopated, yeah, on like the syncopated beats where the regular snare doesn't play. And on here I just got a couple of EQs, stereo shaper. Again, cutting out the muddy frequencies, but don't have to cut the lows because I'm gonna do that in my drums bus channel. This has got a stereo shaper. A similar EQ to what I had on the 808. Almost not even necessary, more like just a cleanup type EQ. So that one with the other snare. All right, and then this is my favorite drum, or my favorite part that I'm about to add is the hi-hat. So I'll let it play with just the 808. Let's see, hi-hat is pattern 3. Regular hi-hat pattern. Okay. Let's go to the hat. So kind of help with like the movement of stuff. Because you'll perceive it as coming from like a slightly different spot when it's lower. Alright, so that's the hat. All I did was, I didn't use a regular EQ. I just used the one that's built into the channel. Boosted, cut a lot of the lows, boosted the transient frequencies, the highs, extreme highs, because that's what's going to cut through the mix. Hi-hat helps to kind of fill out that. But then I also have phaser. These are the parameters. It's hard to hear if you're not used to listening for a phaser, but it kind of just, it gives it a little more character. Alright, and then with that, I have an open hat. Let me turn these things off. Pattern 6. So this is the open hat pattern. You can hear like the lower notes hitting. And then, so for this, I did it pretty similar. My hi-hat processing isn't too difficult. Same thing. Use the channel settings to EQ. But use the phaser again. Stereo shaper. And you really want the open hats to have that stereo imaging or that stereo shaping on there. Because when you record drums, like live drums, you're going to get, how do I say this? You're going to use several different mics, but a lot of your mics are going to pick up portions of the open hats, the hi-hats, anyway, which kind of gives it a wider, fuller sound because it's being picked up by multiple mics. Then I also have a delay on here. It gives it a little bit of a bounce that you don't necessarily hear all the time when everything's playing, but it definitely gives you like, it gives the beat a little bit more flow, a little bit more bounce to it, and that's what you want anyway. The same little cleanup EQ, and then that's it for the drums. Like it's not super complicated. So what I did was, now I've bussed all the drums together, similar to what I did with the instruments. So these are all the drums by themselves. Pretty simple pattern. And then I do some of the same shit on my bus channel. So I don't know if you can see, but so starting with snare, right? Snare, counter snare, hat, open hat. It's just a few drums. But you can see that they, like if I, for instance, select snare, is routed to the drums bus. Drums bus. Drums bus. Drums bus. Okay? So everything I put on here is going to affect all of the drums. So first things first, compress it. Compression is pretty important for drums because how do I say this? It'll let you kind of emphasize, because you got a lot of different things playing at once. So at any particular spot, you know, the hi-hat might be important right now for this half a second, or the snare might be important, or the kick might be important, but the compressor can kind of work that out, figure that out, depending on how you set it up. So again, Fab Filter, I'm using Groovy Glue, which is for drums processing. Then, I mean, this is pretty cool. The auxiliary syn that I tended to use. So I'll do one on the drums, but on the drums you need even less. Like, I like my drums to sound super dry, but you can't leave them all the way dry because then it sounds like, then they sound cheap. I don't really know no other way to say it. Like, it's just, you got to do some shit to them to give the effect that you didn't do shit to them. So anyway, Fab Filter, reverb again, using drum room tight fat. Now this is gonna 100% like give you a huge amount of reverb that you don't necessarily need. I'm gonna copy the value so we can go back. So when you trigger it, it starts out and it's gonna sound bad, just fair warning. But I just turn this all the way down because basically the way, like in my mind, the way I conceptualize the drums is that you're trying to emulate, regardless of what samples you use, how, you know, like electronic it gets, whatever. At the end of the day, you're trying to emulate a drum set player. So if I was somebody playing drum set, right, I'm going to be sitting in a room or wherever, and I'm just going to be in this room. I'm not going to play the snare in this room and then go play this other thing in this other room and play this other thing over here. And it's all going to be the same thing. Only thing is, with like producing music, especially hip hop production, a lot of our drums are samples. We didn't record them personally. Somebody recorded it or whatever. So they're coming from a lot of different places. What you want to do is you want to make it seem like that stuff is all coming from the same place, even though it's not. So I'll put the, what's it called? You want to place all the drums in the same environment. You know what I mean? So drum room tight fat, but you don't want a ton of reverb. So this is what it sounds like with the reverb all the way. Right, not hitting, that sound great. But what you want to do is turn that shit way the fuck down. And it's super subtle. It's just a really subtle thing. But now this brings you a little bit closer to ideally, which is somebody playing it. All right, and then the last thing is on the drums bus is EQ. Gotta EQ the drum because they still have to fit in with the music. It still gotta fit in with the bass. And so I just use the drums preset on, and most of the drum presets cut and boost the same frequency. This is gonna make room for the bass. If I had a kick, I would EQ some of the low out of the kick too. And then, you know, this boost, your high end hi-hat should be sitting right around there. We'll see in a second. Yeah. So you can see this is the hi-hat. and then everything raises up because the snare is filling a lot of that frequency spectrum, right? And so stuff like this will help the hi-hat cut through the mix, so I don't have to do as much when I process the other stuff. All right, so that is all the drums. Let me save this shit. So I already set the levels. So what I would tend to do is go ahead and level this out with the 808, because the 808 can get real, like, it can take over real fast. That shit could take over quick. So it should already be fine. Level it out, add 808 with it, see what we got. I had this line sitting here all the time and sparked it. Alright, so what I would normally do, or what I've been doing, setting the levels, is I just bring them in as far as like order of importance, and then I just raise it up until it's fine, you know, where I like it, and then I drop it down a little bit, because I still want the instruments to sit a little bit under the drums, because it's missing one instrument, and that's the thing, like, that's something that it took me a while to really, not to understand, but to really like sink in, is like an artist still has to get on this. And that's going to be like a lot. Like you basically, like your ears and your brain can only actually perceive a certain amount of things at a time. So that you have a million things going on in a track. You can only, like, you're going to have to focus on certain elements to really hear them. And you can only do that with but so many elements at a time. So you can always go back and listen to this, listen to that. But you're going to be switching from different parts, from part to part, listening to the different ones. So, damn, I fucking lost my train of thought. Fuck it, whatever. Oh, yeah, you're always going to need the artist. So you don't want to fill everything up and have it sound like it should sound a little empty when you're done, because there's still the biggest piece of the puzzle that's missing. All right. All right, so now we got a little groove. Low end sounds good. So for me, most important instrument was the piano. I've already leveled it out and shit. Add the guitar. All right, that sounds pretty good. So what we're gonna do is the way I arrange the beat, I don't have all three of my instrumental parts playing at the same time at any point. So I need to go back. What I was doing earlier was just putting it in there so I could mix it all together. So I'm going back to a point where the pad is in there so I can cue the pad up so y'all can hear it. So remember, I said that's just a counter melody, super subtle. It's really just so, like, if you rapping or whatever on it, like, you hear a little something come in and it kind of drives the track forward. All right, cool. So last thing I needed to throw in there was the transition effect. So does it ever play with two instruments? It does play with 2 instruments, so I'll use that one. Damn, I ain't used to this tobacco. I stopped smoking blunts for a while. Probably need to stop again. Ain't nothing good about tobacco, man. But alright, okay. I don't know if you hear it, the little transition. Alright, sounds pretty good, right? So, remember how I showed you guys everything gets routed to the master channel? At some point here, I'll show you again. So, in general, you have a regular channel, right? Let's take 16. It's just gonna go route to the master. Everything automatically routes to the master. But you can do bus channels, like I showed you, piano, right? You see, going to instrument bus, guitar going to instrument bus. And then I have like the drums. The drums go to drums bus, right? But then these bus channels, they route to the master. And the stuff on the master affects everything. So drums bus, instrument bus, they all go to the master. The 808 is the only one that I didn't bus because that's like its own thing. 808 goes straight to the master channel. So I'm gonna rename this master. And honestly, man, like it's 2020, so we need to start thinking of some different names for shit. We will call it the main channel. Yeah, this FL Studio 20. I don't think whatever the update is, I don't think I've upgraded to that because this is a new computer. I was having so many problems. I'm like, that's why I've been cooking up like crazy because my shit finally don't cut off on me. Like I could run Omnisphere and Isotope, and now I can have Google Chrome open with 50 tabs, and this shit don't even break a sweat. There's so much RAM in here, and I got a solid state drive. See, I'm starting to nerd out. Let me not just. But yeah, so on your master channel, in general, okay, this is bad practice, right? Like this is not correct in a sense because normally you make a track, export a track, you're making a beat, you want to leave what's called headroom on a track because that gives room for an artist. You don't want it to peak, and because once you hit or go above a certain, like if it peaks above a certain level, it's going to do what's called clipping, which is detrimental to your audio without getting into what exactly all of this stuff is. So you want to leave a little bit of room for, the artist to hop on there. So what I read or what I was taught initially was you want to leave -3. You want to have your mix peak from -6 to -3 because that'll leave enough headroom for the artist. But it's a big caveat. That ended up being a problem when I would let people hear beats. Like when we would go to the studio and play shit for people because I've left headroom on some stuff so that there's, room for an artist to record or whatever when everybody else has like compressed the fuck out of their shit and left no headroom. And then whenever it's time to record, they just send over different files. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm gonna just start doing my shit to, first it started off as -1. And with this, the higher the number, the louder it is. So, negative numbers though. So 0 is the highest. You go above 0, you're clipping. So now I just do everything to 0 because that's just what's going on. That's what's going to hit on the speakers. And that's what's important. Like you can always go adjust for the other stuff later. But I say that to say what I'm about to do is wrong. Don't do this. Well, or maybe do it. But it's not fully correct. Like if I was to go teach a class or something, I would never have a fucking class have your shit hit at 0. Like that's, but I ain't doing that. I'm trying to. So anyway, so on your master channel, right? And I should probably leave some of my speakers down because I'm gonna do some stuff that's like that people tend to do in what's called mastering, which is the last. So like the way this normally goes, you make a beat, artist records, then you gotta mix it. And that's what I've kind of been showing you guys that I'm doing the processing. Just minus like the panning and the other like little levels and stuff. So you mix it with the vocals, and then you go to a separate stage that's called mastering. Mastering a lot of people think of mastering as it makes your shit louder, and that's true in most. I don't want to say most because that implies probability. That's true in a lot of cases, but mastering in actuality is preparing the track for like radio or whatever, like play. For most, that tends to be making it loud because we're in like a loudness wars kind of thing right now. You can run analyzers on like songs that have been put out and they clip a million fucking times throughout the song. And clipping it's a bad thing, or it's thought of as a bad thing, but I mean with music, right, I always go back to school. Jazz, all the techniques that we use in jazz music, which is the basis of so much in like, just modern music and American music, whatever. That shit was thought of as wrong. It was wrong. Like, you weren't supposed to do this type of chords. You weren't supposed to play this way. Like, people who's really, they made it like a whole religious thing. Like, this chord is like the devil's chord. And like, it was crazy, So I look at it kind of like that, where it's like things that aren't necessarily correct, but like stylistically or artistically, it's just what's done and it just makes sense. And that's how it's a science, but it's also an art, and that's how you push the art form forward. So anyway, I'm talking a lot over here. What's the word? Proselytizing? I don't know if I'm wrong. Somebody tell me what the right word is. Ruminating. That's another word. All right. So on the master channel, you want to do some light like mastering type stuff. So I have an EQ. Remember, this is going across the entire channel or the entire track. So it's rap. Clearly, we want the bass to be boosted slightly at around 100 hertz, and then we boost the highs a little bit too, because that goes into like the slap or the snap, Then I have a Maximus on here. You can hear it getting louder. And then that same cleanup EQ, because I got one more thing. Right? Right, and that sounds pretty good. So alright, but the last thing that I'm gonna do, and I fucking love this. I used to use the old one. Isotope ozone. So what I used to do was I would do everything I said, right? Leave the headroom. God damn, sorry. Yeah, so leave the headroom, all of that shit, have it at like -6, -3. I would export a WAV file. Then I would take that WAV file and import it into Adobe Audition. Then I would do a few things like normalize it and shit. But then that's when this bad boy Ozone comes on. And then that way I'll have a file that's like mixed, to the correct level, peaking at -3. And then I have my loud ass MP3 or whatever that I let people hear, so they know that the beat can hit. But part of that was, one, so I could have two files, but two, going around the limitations of my computer at the time. Hell, even my last laptop, I used to have to make a file and then drag it into another instance of FL to put Isotope on there, because it's very, very resource, like processor heavy. So if I, like all the VSTs and all the shit that I've showed you, I wouldn't be able to have all of that shit running in Isotope. So it's like, let me just make this file, do whatever. So, but this is, let me see, I can cue these on one at a time. Yeah, I love Isotope, man. All right, so. So this is the track as is. Sorry, I don't want to play it from the beginning. I'm going to play it from like a section with everything in it. Okay. This is one portion. I have all the processing on each individual instrument and drum, the processing on the bus channels, together. Then the bus channels have been routed to the master channel, and I showed you the processing on that. This is the last thing that I do. It's called Ozone. It's got a lot of like modules, and I have my own like little preset on here, and I put all of these on there. Well, this last one is, sometimes I put the last one on there. So first thing, EQ in the whole track, turn that on. And so I'm using what the fuck is this? Enhanced focus. And what this does is it's cutting a little bit of the mids, get rid of that muddiness, boosting some of the areas where the drums are sitting up here, lower mid or upper mids. And if I had a kick, this is kind of exactly where the kick would hit, but it doesn't. I don't have a kick, so this helps fill out with the lower end of like a lot of the drums I have. You still want it to sound full, right? Like you want to sound in general, because it's only, y'all saw, it's only piano, guitar, pad, 3 instruments, and what, 808, 2 snares, hi-hat, all that. So 5 drums. That's it. But you still want it to sound full, even though there's only 8 elements, right? So I got another EQ. And one thing, it seems like I'm using a lot of like programs that do the same shit. But what's interesting is something that I found out is that a lot of stuff colors your sound in different ways. So I could have 2 EQs cut the same frequency and they'll sound slightly different because of the way that the algorithms and stuff that these programs process, you know, the audio data. Because remember, this is all just zeros and ones and shit. Like, so it's just processing data. It's just doing it, you know, they have different formulas, whatever. So this is the next EQ. Crisp transients. Remember we talked about those transient frequencies earlier. Getting the first. Well, no, those are limiters. That's different. But just to make it louder immediately, using the punchy transient setting on the Isotope Vintage compressor. So once again, talking about those transient frequencies. Damn, I got 2 minutes. I've been going for an hour. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. And some of the stuff, like the threshold, that's the point at which it kicks in. So anything that's under negative 30 decibels, it won't affect. It's a lot of shit, man. Like the attack is how long it takes to actually trigger. The release is like when it turns off. It's a lot of shit. All right, multi-band depth for the imager. Added some stereo imaging on there. And I normally use modern width, I want to say, which actually takes this lowest band and it narrows it some. That gives me a little bit more punch, but I like the wide sound on this beat. All right, and then I always add this, but sometimes I don't add the maximizer, because they're both limiters in a sense. So vintage limiter, I'm using Titan Transient. Sometimes I use other, just depending on like the color of the track. It's gonna hit at -5, and the ceiling is where it's gonna stop it at. So it's gonna keep everything from going above -0.1. 0 is the highest you can go without clipping. Got louder immediately. And then on this one I did add the maximizer. I have, it's another type of limiter basically. I have that triggering at -4.8 and it's capping out at 0, which is where I wanted the beat to be. All right, and that's that.